It was a typical Tuesday evening when I returned home from work, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the street. I had been looking forward to a quiet night, perhaps catching up on a book or watching a game on TV. Little did I know that my life was about to unravel in a way I could never have anticipated. As I opened the front door, a strange silence enveloped me. The usual sounds of our home, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant clatter of dishes, were conspicuously absent. I called out for Robin, expecting her to respond from the kitchen or the living room, but all I received was an eerie stillness. My heart began to race, an unsettling feeling creeping up my spine. I stepped further inside, glancing around the living room. Everything seemed in order, but something felt off. I made my way down the hallway, my instincts on high alert. As I approached our bedroom, a knot formed in my stomach. I could hear muffled voices and laughter that sounded too intimate, too familiar. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob. A part of me wanted to turn back, to pretend I hadn't heard anything, to shield myself from whatever awaited me on the other side. But curiosity got the better of me. I twisted the knob and pushed the door open. What I saw shattered my world into a million pieces. Robin was sprawled across the bed, her laughter ringing out like a cruel taunt. And there, beside her, was Sergey Grorsky, the local pianist whose name I had heard more times than I cared to count. They were wrapped in each other's arms, a scene of betrayal so vivid that it felt like a punch to the gut. Time seemed to freeze as I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. Shock washed over me, followed closely by a wave of rage. My mind raced, trying to process the reality before me. How could she do this? How could he? The anger bubbled up inside me, threatening to spill over. "Robin!" I shouted, my voice a mix of disbelief and fury. The laughter died instantly, replaced by a heavy silence. She turned to face me, her eyes wide with shock, as if she had just been caught in a crime. "Jake, she began, but I cut her off. "Save it!" I spat, my voice trembling with emotion. "How long has this been going on? How could you betray me like this?" Sergey scrambled to pull on his clothes, his face a mask of guilt and fear. I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins, a primal instinct to confront the man who had invaded my life. My fists clenched at my sides, and I took a step forward, ready to unleash the storm of emotions that had been building inside me. But in that moment, as I looked at Robin, I saw not just the woman I had loved but also the person who had shattered my trust. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my gut, and the realization hit me harder than any blow could. I was not just angry, I was devastated. "I trusted you," I whispered, the weight of my words hanging in the air like a thick fog. "I thought we had something real." Robin's expression shifted from shock to guilt. And for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of remorse in her eyes. But it was too late. The damage was done, and the pain was unbearable. As Sergey fumbled to leave, I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. I was standing at the precipice of a new reality, one that I never wanted to face. The life I had known was crumbling around me, and all I could do was watch as it fell apart. At that moment, I made a silent vow. I would not let this define me. I would rise from the ashes of this betrayal, stronger and more determined than ever. But first, I needed to let the storm of emotions wash over me, to confront the pain that threatened to consume me. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a long and arduous journey. The days that followed the revelation felt like a blur, a chaotic whirlwind of emotions that left me reeling. I was trapped in a storm of anger, sadness, and disbelief, each feeling crashing over me like relentless waves. My heart felt heavy, weighed down by the betrayal that had shattered my world. Sleep became a distant memory. Each night, I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of Robin and Sergey. I replayed the scene over and over in my head, each time feeling the sting of betrayal anew. The silence of the house was deafening, echoing the emptiness I felt inside. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything to release the pent-up emotions that threatened to consume me. But instead, I found myself getting up, night after night, and slipping into my running shoes. The rhythmic pounding of my feet against the pavement became my escape, a way to channel the fury and heartbreak that churned within me. I would run for miles, the cool night air filling my lungs, the darkness around me matching the turmoil in my heart. I discovered a new routine, 30 minutes on the treadmill, followed by another 30 on the rowing machine. Each drop of sweat that dripped from my brow felt like a release. A cathartic purge of the anger that had taken root in my soul. I pushed myself harder, faster, as if I could outrun the pain that haunted me. With every stride, I imagined leaving behind the memory of Robin and Sergey, the laughter that had once filled our home now replaced by the sound of my breath and the pounding of my heart. During those early days, I was a man possessed. I threw myself into my workouts, the gym becoming my sanctuary. I lost track of time, consumed by the adrenaline and endorphins that coursed through my veins. The more I trained, the more I felt a sense of control returning to my life. It was as if each rep, each mile, was a small victory against the chaos that had invaded my existence. But the anger was always lurking just beneath the surface. I would often find myself staring at the wall, my mind drifting to thoughts of revenge. Images of confronting Sergey flashed through my head, fantasies of retribution that made my blood boil. I knew it wouldn't solve anything, but the urge to lash out was intoxicating. I wanted him to feel the pain he had inflicted on me, to understand the depth of my suffering. One night, after an especially grueling workout, I collapsed onto the gym floor, panting and drenched in sweat. The exhaustion washed over me, and for a moment, I felt a semblance of peace. But as I lay there, staring up at the fluorescent lights, the reality of my situation crashed down on me again. I was alone. The woman I had loved, and the life I had built, were all gone, replaced by a hollow void that seemed impossible to fill. I pushed myself back up, wiping the sweat from my brow. I couldn't let this consume me. I had to find a way to move forward, to reclaim my life. I started to focus on my workouts not just as a means of escape, but as a way to rebuild myself. I set goals, not just for my physical fitness but for my mental well-being. I would emerge from this stronger and more resilient. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice changes, not just in my body, but in my mindset. The anger was still there, simmering just beneath the surface, but I was learning to channel it. I started to embrace the pain as a part of my journey, a necessary step toward healing. Each drop of sweat became a reminder that I was still alive, still fighting, still capable of rising from the ashes of betrayal. I knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but I was determined to face it head-on. I would not let Robin's betrayal define me. I would reclaim my life, one step at a time. As I laced up my shoes for yet another run, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me, a promise that I would emerge from this stronger than ever. The gym became my refuge, a place where I could escape the chaos of my emotions and channel my pain into something productive. I had never been particularly athletic, but in the wake of Robin's betrayal, I found myself drawn to the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the treadmill and the steady pull of the rowing machine. It was as if these machines were my lifelines, offering a way to release the pent-up anger and sadness that threatened to consume me. Each morning, I would rise before dawn, the world still cloaked in darkness. The quiet of the early hours felt comforting, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had invaded my life. I would slip into my workout gear, the fabric clinging to me like a second skin, and head to the gym with a singular purpose, to push myself beyond my limits. My routine began with the treadmill. As I stepped onto the moving belt, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I would start with a slow jog, allowing my body to warm up, but within minutes, I would crank up the speed. The rhythm of my feet hitting the surface created a steady beat, drowning out the thoughts of betrayal that echoed in my mind. With every step, I felt the anger begin to dissipate, replaced by a sense of determination. I would often set small goals for myself during these sessions. Just 5 more minutes, I would tell myself, or let's see how far I can go today. The physical exertion became a game, a challenge I was determined to conquer. I would lose myself in the numbers on the screen, watching the distance increase with each stride. It was empowering to see my progress and to feel my body growing stronger with each passing day. After the treadmill, I would transition to the rowing machine. The rhythmic pull of the handle and the resistance of the water created a meditative state. Each stroke felt like a release, a way to cleanse my mind of the negativity that had taken root. I would focus on my breathing, inhaling deeply as I pulled the handle toward me, then exhaling as I pushed it away. It became a mantra of sorts, a way to ground myself in the present moment. The physical activity was cathartic. I would often find myself lost in thought, reflecting on my emotions while my body worked tirelessly. The anger I felt toward Robin and Sergey transformed into raw energy, fueling my workouts. I would visualize my frustrations as weights, lifting them off my shoulders with each representative. The gym became a sanctuary where I could confront my feelings without judgment. As the weeks went by, I began to notice significant changes, not just in my physique, but in my mental state as well. The workouts became a source of clarity, helping me process the whirlwind of emotions I had been grappling with. I found that the more I trained, the more I could distance myself from the pain of betrayal. The endorphins released during exercise created a natural high, lifting my spirits and providing a much-needed respite from the heartache. I also started to experiment with different workout routines. Incorporating strength training and high-intensity interval training into my regimen. Each session became a new opportunity to challenge myself, to push beyond my perceived limits. I discovered a newfound confidence in my abilities, a sense of empowerment that had been absent in the wake of Robin's betrayal. In the evenings, I would often return to the gym for a second workout, this time focusing on weightlifting. The clanking of weights and the grunts of fellow gym-goers created an atmosphere of camaraderie. I found solace in the shared experience of pushing our bodies to the limit, each of us battling our struggles in our ways. I struck up conversations with other gym members, forming connections that helped to distract me from my pain. With every drop of sweat that fell to the floor, I felt a sense of release. The gym was not just a place to work out, it became a sanctuary where I could confront my emotions head-on. I learned to embrace the discomfort and to find strength in vulnerability. Each session was a step toward healing, a way to reclaim my life from the shadows of betrayal. As I continued to train, I realized that I was not just rebuilding my body, I was also reconstructing my identity. The anger and sadness that had once defined me began to fade, replaced by a fierce determination to move forward. I was no longer just a man betrayed, I was a man on a journey of self-discovery, fueled by the desire to rise above the pain and emerge stronger than ever. It was a typical Wednesday morning when I first met Seymour. The gym was buzzing with activity, the sound of weights clanking and the rhythmic thud of feet on treadmills filling the air. I was in the middle of my routine, pushing through another grueling session on the rowing machine, when I noticed him across the room. He was a tall man with a rugged build, his face lined with the kind of weariness that suggested he had fought his own battles. As I finished my set, I wiped the sweat from my brow and decided to take a break. I grabbed a towel and headed over to the water fountain, where Seymour was filling his bottle. He caught my eye and offered a nod, a small gesture that felt oddly comforting amid my turmoil. "Hey, man. You've been working hard," he said, a friendly smile breaking through the fatigue etched on his face. "Yeah, trying to stay focused," I replied, returning his smile. "You too. I've seen you here a lot lately." "Yeah, it's my therapy," he chuckled, but there was a hint of seriousness in his tone. "I've been going through some stuff myself." His words struck a chord with me. I could sense the weight of his struggles, and it felt refreshing to meet someone who understood the need to escape into physical activity. "Same here," I admitted, my guard lowering slightly. Just trying to work through some personal issues. Seymour raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. Care to share? Sometimes it helps to talk about it. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I wanted to open up to a stranger. But something about his demeanor felt trustworthy, and I found myself nodding. My wife cheated on me, I blurted out, the words spilling from my lips before I could think twice. Man, I'm sorry to hear that, he replied, his expression shifting to one of empathy. I can relate. My girlfriend did the same thing a few months back. It's a tough pill to swallow. We stood there, two men united by our shared pain. I felt an unexpected sense of relief wash over me as I realized I wasn't alone in this. Seymour's honesty opened the floodgates, and we began to share our stories. Our frustrations and our heartbreaks. I found out when I came home early one day, he said, his voice laced with bitterness. She was with some guy the first thought was a friend. It felt like my whole world came crashing down. Same here, I said, feeling a surge of camaraderie. I walked in on my wife with her lover. It was like a scene from a nightmare. As we spoke, I could see the understanding in his eyes. We both knew the pain of betrayal and the feelings of inadequacy that came with it. It was cathartic to share our experiences and to vent our frustrations in a space that felt safe and non-judgmental. Have you thought about what you want to do next? Seymour asked, leaning against the wall as we took a breather. I mean, how do you plan to move forward? I shrugged, the weight of uncertainty settling on my shoulders. Honestly, I'm still figuring it out. I've been focusing on my workouts, trying to channel my anger into something productive. But I can't shake the feeling of wanting revenge. Seymour nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. I get that. It's tempting to want to lash out, to make them feel the pain they've caused. But trust me, it won't bring you the satisfaction you think it will. His words resonated with me. I had been toying with the idea of revenge, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't fill the void left by Robin's betrayal. Yeah, I guess you're right. It's just hard to let go of that anger. Maybe we can help each other, he suggested, a hint of a smile returning to his face. We can keep each other accountable. Work out together, and talk things through. It might help to have someone who understands what you're going through. I considered his offer, feeling a spark of hope ignite within me. I'd like that, I replied, a genuine smile breaking through the heaviness of my heart. It's good to know I'm not alone in this. From that day on, Seymour and I became workout partners. We established a routine, meeting at the gym several times a week. Our training sessions were filled with laughter and shared frustrations. A welcome distraction from the pain we both carried. We pushed each other to new limits, both physically and mentally, finding solace in our friendship. As we trained side by side, we began to discuss our lives outside the gym. We shared stories about our past relationships, our dreams, and our aspirations. Seymour had a passion for music, and he often spoke about his love for playing the guitar. I found myself opening up more, sharing my thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. With each passing day, our bond grew stronger. We became each other's support system, a reminder that we could rise above the pain of betrayal. Together, we navigated the rocky terrain of heartbreak, discovering that friendship could be a powerful antidote to the wounds we carried. In the midst of our shared struggles, I found a sense of hope. Seymour and I were two men on a journey of healing, and together, we were determined to reclaim our lives from the shadows of our pasts. As the weeks passed, my friendship with Seymour deepened, and our conversations began to take a darker turn. While we had initially bonded over our shared pain, it wasn't long before the topic of revenge crept into our discussions. The anger we felt toward our ex-partners simmered just beneath the surface, and it was only a matter of time before we started to entertain the idea of retaliation. One evening, after an intense workout session, we collapsed onto the benches in the gym's locker room, our bodies drenched in sweat and our minds racing. The adrenaline from our training still coursed through our veins, and as we caught our breath, the conversation shifted. Have you thought about how you'd get back at Robin? Seymour asked, his eyes glinting with a mix of mischief and frustration. I chuckled darkly, the idea of revenge suddenly feeling exhilarating. I've definitely thought about it. I mean, she's living her life like nothing happened. It's infuriating. Seymour leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. What if we did something to really get under their skin? Something that would make them feel the pain we felt. I felt a rush of excitement at the thought. Like what? I mean, I could always confront Sergey, maybe make a scene. But that feels too easy. True, he replied, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. What if we went for something more creative? Something that would hit them where it hurts, but without getting ourselves into serious trouble? I considered his words, my mind racing with possibilities. What if we exposed them? Maybe we could find a way to let everyone know about their affair. Make them feel the shame they deserve. Seymour's eyes lit up. That could work. We could gather evidence, maybe even take some photos of them together. Nothing too incriminating, just enough to create a scandal. The thrill of the idea sent a shiver down my spine. The thought of Robin and Sergey facing public humiliation felt satisfying, a way to reclaim the power they had taken from us. I like that. It's like turning the tables on them. We brainstormed for hours, our emotions swinging between anger and excitement as we plotted our revenge. The gym, once a sanctuary for healing, became a breeding ground for our darker impulses. We discussed everything from social media exposés to creating fake accounts to spread rumors. Each idea fueled our fury, igniting a fire within us that we hadn't realized was still smoldering. But as we talked, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that revenge might not be the answer. I had spent so much time focusing on my workouts, channeling my pain into something productive. Did I really want to risk all that progress by descending into a cycle of vengeance? Do you think this will actually make us feel better? I asked, my voice laced with uncertainty. What if it just ends up making us feel worse? Seymour paused, his expression shifting from excitement to contemplation. I get what you're saying. But part of me thinks that if we don't do something, we'll just be left with this anger forever. It's like we need to take control of the situation. I nodded, understanding his point. The desire for control was strong, especially after feeling so powerless in the wake of our betrayals. But I also knew that revenge could lead to a dark path, one that could ultimately consume us both. Maybe we should focus on ourselves instead, I suggested tentatively. What if we used this energy to improve our lives rather than trying to drag them down? Seymour sighed, the fire in his eyes dimming slightly. You might be right. But it's hard to let go of that anger. It feels good to think about making them pay. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our emotions hanging heavy in the air. I could see the conflict in Seymour's eyes, the same struggle I felt within myself. We both wanted to rise above the pain, but the allure of revenge was intoxicating. In the end, we decided to take a step back from our vengeful plans. Instead of acting on our anger, we agreed to focus on our workouts and our personal growth. We would channel our energy into becoming stronger, both physically and mentally. Revenge could wait. For now, we needed to heal. As we left the gym that night, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The darkness of revenge still lingered in the back of my mind, but I knew that I was on a path towards something greater. With Seymour by my side, I was determined to rise above the pain and reclaim my life, one step at a time. Despite our earlier decision to focus on personal growth, the idea of revenge lingered in the back of my mind like a persistent itch. The anger I felt toward Robin and Sergey was still raw, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to do something, anything, to regain a sense of control. As the days passed, I found myself drawn back into the dark allure of retaliation, and I knew I wasn't alone in this. One evening after a particularly intense workout, Seymour and I sat in the corner of the gym, our bodies still buzzing from the adrenaline. The conversation naturally drifted back to our earlier discussions about revenge. Have you given any more thought to our plan? Seymour asked, his eyes glinting with a mix of excitement and mischief. I hesitated, weighing my options. I think we should gather information first. Find out everything we can about Sergey and any other guys Robin might be seeing. Seymour nodded, a grin spreading across his face. That's a good start. We need to know what we're dealing with before we make any moves. We began to brainstorm our approach. The plan was simple: gather as much intel as possible on Sergey and Robin's other potential lovers. I felt a rush of adrenaline at the thought of becoming a detective in my own life, piecing together the puzzle of their betrayal. Let's start with Sergey, I suggested. I know he plays at that jazz club downtown. We could go there, see if he's performing, and maybe even talk to some of the patrons. They might know more about him. Seymour leaned back, contemplating the idea. That could work. We can go undercover, act like we're just there for the music. But we need to be careful, not to raise any suspicions. Agreed, I said, feeling a sense of purpose wash over me. We'll take notes, maybe even discreetly record conversations if we can. I want to know everything about him, his habits, his relationships, anything that could be useful. We spent the next few days mapping out our plan. We decided to visit the jazz club on a Friday night, when it would be packed with people. The atmosphere would provide the perfect cover for our investigation. We also made a list of questions to ask, things like how long Sergey had been performing there and if anyone knew about his personal life. As the night approached, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Part of me was thrilled at the prospect of gathering information, but another part of me questioned whether this was the right path. I had spent so much time focusing on my workouts and personal growth. Was I really willing to dive back into the darkness of revenge? Despite my reservations, I pushed those thoughts aside. I needed to know more about the man who had betrayed me, the man who had taken my wife away. The desire for answers was overwhelming, and I was determined to see this through. On the night of our planned outing, Seymour and I arrived at the jazz club, the sounds of smooth melodies spilling out onto the street. The vibrant atmosphere was intoxicating, filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. We slipped inside, blending into the crowd, our eyes scanning the room for Sergey. We found a table near the stage, and as we settled in, I felt my heart race with anticipation. The band was setting up, and I could see Sergey in the spotlight, adjusting his piano keys. My anger began to bubble to the surface as I watched him, a smug smile on his face as he prepared to perform. Look at him, I muttered to Seymour, my voice low. He looks so comfortable, so at ease. Like he hasn't a care in the world. Seymour nodded, his expression mirroring my frustration. Let's see how long he can keep that up. As the music began, I focused on Sergey, taking mental notes of his interactions with the audience. He was charming, effortlessly engaging with the crowd. And I could see how easily he captivated those around him. It made my blood boil to think that Robin had chosen him over me. Between sets, we struck up conversations with other patrons, asking casual questions about the band and Sergey. I was surprised at how much information we managed to gather. People spoke highly of him, praising his talent and charisma. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were merely feeding into his ego. Let's head to the bar, I suggested to Seymour, hoping to gather more intel. We can listen in on conversations and see if anyone mentions anything about his personal life. As we made our way to the bar, I spotted a group of women chatting animatedly. One of them caught my eye. She was laughing and seemed to be particularly taken with Sergey. I felt a surge of jealousy and anger, the familiar emotions rising to the surface. Let's see what they know, Seymour said, nudging me forward. We approached the group, introducing ourselves and asking about the band. The women were friendly, eager to share their thoughts on Sergey and the music. He's amazing, one of them gushed. I heard he's single, too. Such a catch. My heart sank at her words. The thought of him being single, free to pursue anyone he wanted, felt like a punch to the gut. I exchanged a glance with Seymour, who seemed to sense my frustration. Let's keep digging, he urged, his voice low. "We need to find out if there's more to this guy than just his charm." As the night progressed, we gathered snippets of information, rumors about Sergey's past relationships, whispers of his flirtations with various women. Each piece of intel fueled my anger, solidifying my resolve to take action. By the time we left the club, I felt a mix of exhilaration and rage. We had gathered valuable information, but it came at a cost. The more I learned about Sergey, the more I realized how deeply I wanted to make him pay for what he had done. As we drove home, Seymour and I discussed our next steps. We were no longer just two men nursing our wounds, we were now partners in a quest for revenge. The thrill of plotting against our betrayers ignited a fire within us, and I knew there was no turning back. We had a plan, and we were determined to see it through. The darkness of revenge had seeped into our lives, and with each passing day, it became harder to resist the pull of vengeance. I could feel the storm brewing inside me, and I was ready to unleash it on those who had wronged us. As the days passed, the thirst for revenge consumed me. I found myself constantly thinking about Sergey, obsessing over the information we had gathered at the jazz club. The more I learned about him, the more I wanted to see him suffer. It was an intoxicating feeling, a dark cocktail of anger and determination that fueled my every waking moment. Seymour and I spent countless hours discussing our plan of attack. We pored over the details we had collected, looking for any weaknesses or vulnerabilities we could exploit. The idea of exposing Sergey's affair to the world still held a certain appeal, but we knew that we needed to be more strategic in our approach. One evening, as I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, a thought struck me. What if we started by simply observing Sergey, learning his routines and habits? It was a low-risk first step, and it might give us valuable insight into his life. I shared the idea with Seymour the next day at the gym. He listened intently, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "That's brilliant," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "We can gather even more intel, figure out his weaknesses. It's the perfect first move." We decided to put the plan into action immediately. That very night, Seymour and I found ourselves parked outside Sergey's apartment, our eyes glued to the entrance. The anticipation was palpable, a mix of fear and exhilaration that made my heart race. As we sat in the car, watching the world go by, I couldn't help but feel a sense of power. We were in control now, the hunters rather than the hunted. The thought of Sergey going about his life, unaware of the storm that was brewing, filled me with a twisted sense of satisfaction. Time seemed to crawl by, but eventually, we saw movement at the apartment door. Sergey emerged, dressed in casual clothes, a guitar case slung over his shoulder. He looked relaxed, carefree, and I felt a surge of anger at the sight of him. "Let's follow him," I whispered to Seymour, my voice barely audible. We started the car and pulled out onto the street, keeping a safe distance behind Sergey's vehicle. As we drove, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Was this really the right thing to do? Was I becoming the very thing I despised, a man consumed by vengeance? But the anger within me was too strong to ignore, and I pushed those doubts aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. Sergey led us to a small, cozy apartment complex on the other side of town. He parked his car and headed inside. And Seymour and I followed suit, finding a spot a few blocks away. We sat in silence for a moment, watching as Sergey disappeared into one of the buildings. "Now what?" Seymour asked, his voice low. I thought for a moment, weighing our options. "Let's wait a bit, see if he comes back out. If he does, we can follow him again, see where else he goes." Seymour nodded, settling back into his seat. We sat there for what felt like hours, our eyes trained on the apartment building. The minutes ticked by, and I found myself growing increasingly restless. What if this was all for nothing? What if Sergey stayed put for the rest of the night? Just as I was about to suggest calling it quits, the front door opened, and Sergey emerged once more. He was carrying a bag of groceries, his guitar nowhere to be seen. We started the car and followed him as he drove to a nearby market, parking a safe distance away. As we watched him go about his business, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment. This wasn't the dramatic confrontation I had been hoping for. It was just a man, doing mundane tasks, living his life. But then, something caught my eye. As Sergey exited the market, he paused to chat with a woman, his body language relaxed and friendly. They exchanged a few words, and then he leaned in, planting a kiss on her cheek. I felt my blood boil as I watched the scene unfold. So much for being a single, eligible bachelor. Sergey was clearly involved with someone else, and the thought of him betraying Robin with yet another woman made me sick to my stomach. "Did you see that?" I hissed to Seymour, my voice laced with anger. "Yeah," he replied, his eyes narrowed. "Looks like our boy has a wandering eye." We watched as Sergey and the woman parted ways, each heading in a different direction. We decided to follow the woman, curious to see where she was going. She led us to a small apartment complex, and as she entered one of the buildings, we realized that this must be her home. As we sat in the car, watching the building, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was thrilled at the thought of uncovering Sergey's secrets, of having leverage over him. But another part of me felt ashamed, like I was stooping to his level, becoming the very thing I despised. "What now?" Seymour asked, breaking the silence. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know. I mean, we've got some good intel, but is this really what we want to be doing?" Seymour was silent for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "I get what you're saying, man. This whole thing feels, I don't know, dirty. Like we're becoming the bad guys." I nodded, relief washing over me at his words. "Exactly. I mean, we're supposed to be the good guys here, right? The ones who got screwed over?" "Yeah," Seymour replied, a rueful smile on his face. "But I guess that's the thing about revenge. It has a way of turning everyone into the villain." We sat there for a while, lost in our own thoughts. The thrill of the chase had worn off, replaced by a sense of unease and uncertainty. Were we really doing the right thing? Were we any better than Sergey and Robin? As we drove home in silence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment in myself. I had let my anger consume me, blinding me to the consequences of my actions. I had become the very thing I had sworn to destroy, a man consumed by vengeance. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized that it wasn't too late to turn back. I could still choose a different path, one that didn't involve stooping to Sergey's level. It was time to let go of the anger and focus on healing. On rebuilding my life in a way that made me proud. With that realization, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead might be long and difficult, but I knew that I had the strength to face it. And with Seymour by my side, I knew that I wasn't alone. The days following our surveillance of Sergey were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, caught between the desire for revenge and the nagging voice in my head urging me to walk away. But the anger I felt was a powerful force. One that pushed me to take action. I was tired of being the victim, tired of feeling powerless. It was time to confront Sergey and make him pay for what he had done. Seymour and I devised a plan. We would confront Sergey at the jazz club, where he performed every Friday night. The idea was to catch him off guard, to make him feel the weight of his betrayal. I could already envision the look on his face when he realized who I was and what I was there to do. The thought filled me with a twisted sense of satisfaction. As the night approached, my heart raced with anticipation. I felt a mix of excitement and dread, knowing that I was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. Seymour and I arrived at the club early, taking our seats at a table near the stage. The atmosphere was electric, filled with the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses, but all I could focus on was the man who would soon take the stage. When Sergey finally appeared, my heart raced. He looked confident, charming, and completely unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. As he began to play, I felt the anger within me simmering just below the surface, ready to erupt. After a few songs, I signaled to Seymour. "It's time," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We stood up and made our way toward the stage, my heart pounding in my chest. Each step felt heavy, as if I were walking toward my own execution. As we approached, Sergey noticed us and flashed a smile, completely oblivious to my intentions. "Hey there. Glad to see some new faces," he called out, his voice dripping with charm. "Cut the act, Sergey," I said, my voice low but steady. The moment felt surreal, as if time had slowed down. The crowd around us faded into the background, and all I could see was him, the man who had betrayed me, the man who had taken everything from me. His smile faltered, confusion crossing his face. "What are you talking about?" I took a step closer, feeling the adrenaline surge through my veins. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. You think you can just waltz into my life and take my wife without any consequences?" Seymour stood beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. "You think you can play with people's lives and get away with it?" he added, his voice filled with anger. The crowd began to take notice, whispers rippling through the audience as they turned to watch the confrontation unfold. Sergey's expression shifted from confusion to defensiveness. "Look, man, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It just happened." "Just happened?" I scoffed, the anger boiling over. "You think that's an excuse? You broke my heart, and you think you can just brush it off like it's nothing?" In that moment, I felt a rush of satisfaction. I was finally confronting the man who had caused me so much pain. The anger that had been building inside me for months was finally being released, and it felt good. But as I stood there, facing Sergey, I realized that this wasn't just about him. It was about me reclaiming my power. About standing up for myself after feeling so helpless for so long. But then, as the words left my mouth, something shifted. I saw the fear in Sergey's eyes, the realization of the consequences of his actions dawning on him. It was a look I had never anticipated, a mix of regret and vulnerability that made me hesitate. "Jake, I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know you were still together." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. For a brief moment, I felt a twinge of empathy. But the anger quickly flooded back, drowning out any compassion I might have felt. "You knew exactly what you were doing," I shot back, my voice rising. "You took her from me, and now you're going to pay for it." At that moment, everything spiraled out of control. I felt the urge to lash out, to make him feel the pain I had endured. I pushed him, hard, and he stumbled back, nearly losing his balance. The crowd gasped, and I could sense the tension in the air. "Stop!" Seymour shouted, stepping forward to intervene. "This isn't the way to handle this." But the anger had taken over, blinding me to reason. I lunged at Sergey again, my fists clenched, ready to unleash my fury. But before I could make contact, I felt a firm grip on my shoulder. Seymour was holding me back, his strength anchoring me in place. "Jake, don't," he urged, his voice steady. "This isn't going to solve anything." In that moment, reality crashed down on me like a tidal wave. I was on the brink of crossing a line I could never uncross. The satisfaction I had felt moments before evaporated, replaced by a hollow emptiness. I was about to become the very thing I despised, a man driven by rage, willing to hurt another to satisfy my own pain. I took a step back, breathing heavily, my heart racing. The adrenaline that had fueled my anger began to fade, leaving behind a sense of emptiness. I looked at Sergey, who was now standing defensively, his expression a mix of fear and confusion. The crowd around us was silent, their eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. What have I become? I thought, the weight of my actions crashing down on me. I had wanted to confront Sergey, to make him feel the pain I had endured, but instead, I was standing on the edge of a precipice, ready to fall into darkness. "Let's go," I said to Seymour, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned away from Sergey, the anger dissipating, leaving behind only regret. I had come seeking revenge, but what I found was a deep sense of emptiness. As we left the club, I felt the weight of my actions pressing down on me. I had crossed a line, and the satisfaction I had hoped to find had eluded me. Instead, I was left with the realization that revenge would never fill the void left by betrayal. I was still hurting, still lost, and now I had to confront the consequences of my choices. In that moment, I understood that the path to healing would not come from seeking vengeance, but from finding a way to reclaim my life and move forward. The confrontation with Sergey had opened my eyes to the darkness within me, and it was time to confront that darkness head-on. The drive home was shrouded in silence, the weight of my actions hanging heavily in the air. I could feel the tension between Seymour and me, an unspoken acknowledgement of the chaos we had just unleashed. My heart was racing, but it wasn't from the adrenaline of the confrontation. It was the gnawing sense of guilt that had settled in my chest like a lead weight. As we pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, staring blankly at the steering wheel. The events of the night replayed in my mind like a broken record, each moment more painful than the last. I had gone to the club seeking revenge, hoping to reclaim some semblance of power. But instead, I had crossed a line that left me feeling hollow and ashamed. "Jake," Seymour finally broke the silence, his voice low and cautious. "What just happened back there?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair, frustration and disappointment swirling within me. "I don't know, man. I thought confronting him would make me feel better, but it didn't. It felt wrong." Seymour nodded, his expression serious. "I could see it in your eyes. You were about to lose control. That's not who you are." I felt a surge of anger at his words, but deep down, I knew he was right. I just wanted him to understand the pain he caused. I wanted him to feel something, anything. "But did you?" Seymour asked, his gaze steady. "Did you really think that pushing him around would make you feel better?" "It's not going to change what happened." His words struck a chord, and I felt the heat of shame rise in my cheeks. "I thought it would help me reclaim some power, you know? I thought I could finally stand up for myself." "But at what cost?" Seymour pressed. "You didn't just confront him, you almost hurt him. You were about to become the very thing we despise." "Is that really what you want?" I leaned back in my seat, the weight of his words settling in. I had wanted to be the hero of my own story, but instead, I had played the villain. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. "I don't want to be that person," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to feel something other than this pain." Seymour sighed, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I get it, man. We're both hurting. But we can't let that pain turn us into monsters. We have to find a better way to deal with this." As I stepped out of the car, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. The confrontation had drained me, both physically and emotionally. I walked into my house, the familiar surroundings feeling foreign and empty. The silence was deafening, a stark reminder of the life I had lost. I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. The anger that had fueled my actions had dissipated, leaving behind only a profound sense of disappointment. I had thought that confronting Sergey would bring me some closure, but instead, it had only deepened the wounds I was trying to heal. Seymour joined me on the couch, his presence a comforting reminder that I wasn't alone in this. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I don't know," I replied, my voice cracking. I thought I could find some kind of satisfaction in revenge. But all I feel is regret. I don't want to be that person anymore." Seymour nodded, understanding etched on his face. "Then let's figure out how to move forward. We can't change what happened, but we can choose how we respond to it." In that moment, I realized that the path to healing wouldn't come from revenge but from confronting my pain head-on. I needed to find a way to let go of the anger that had consumed me and focus on rebuilding my life. I want to focus on myself, I said, my voice steadier now. I want to reclaim my life without resorting to violence or revenge. I need to heal. Seymour smiled, relief washing over his features. That's the spirit. We can do this together. We'll find healthier ways to cope with our pain. As we sat there, the weight of the confrontation began to lift. I still felt the sting of regret, but I also felt a flicker of hope. I was ready to let go of the darkness that had threatened to consume me and embrace a new path, one that focused on healing, growth, and ultimately, forgiveness. The road ahead would be challenging, but I knew I wouldn't be walking it alone. With Seymour by my side, I felt a renewed sense of determination. It was time to reclaim my life, not through revenge, but through resilience and strength. I was ready to face the future, one step at a time. The days following the confrontation with Sergey were a whirlwind of emotions. I found myself oscillating between guilt, regret, and a lingering sense of anger that refused to dissipate. The satisfaction I had hoped to find in confronting him had eluded me, leaving behind only a hollow emptiness that seemed impossible to fill. As I sat in my living room, staring at the walls that had once felt like a sanctuary, I couldn't help but feel lost. The life I had once known had crumbled around me, and I was left to pick up the pieces. But the path forward was no longer clear. The idea of revenge that had once consumed me now felt like a weight dragging me down, a darkness that threatened to consume me from within. It was in this moment of uncertainty that Seymour reached out, his voice a beacon of hope in the midst of my turmoil. "Hey, man," he said, his tone gentle. "I've been thinking about what happened the other night. About what we're doing." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Yeah, me too. I can't stop thinking about it. I thought confronting Sergey would make me feel better, but it just made everything worse." Seymour nodded, his expression serious. "I know. I've been there too. But I think it's time we start to reconsider this whole revenge thing." I felt a twinge of resistance at his words, the idea of letting go of my anger like a betrayal of everything I had been feeling. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice laced with uncertainty. "I mean, look at where it's gotten us," Seymour replied, gesturing around the room. "We're both miserable, stuck in this cycle of pain and anger. Is this really what we want for ourselves?" I sat in silence for a moment, his words sinking in. He was right, of course. The pursuit of revenge had only brought me more pain, more regret. It had consumed me, blinding me to the possibility of healing and growth. "I just don't know what else to do," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "The anger is all I have left. It's the only thing that's kept me going." Seymour reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I know, man. I know how tempting it is to hold on to that anger. But it's not going to heal us. It's only going to destroy us." I felt the weight of his words pressing down on me, the truth of them undeniable. The anger that had once felt like a shield was now a cage, trapping me in a cycle of pain and resentment. "So what do we do instead?" I asked, my voice tinged with desperation. "How do we move forward?" Seymour leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed in thought. "We focus on ourselves. On healing. On becoming the men we want to be, regardless of what Robin and Sergey did." I nodded, the idea taking root in my mind. "But how? How do we let go of the anger and the pain?" "It's not going to be easy," Seymour admitted. "But we have to start somewhere. We have to make the choice to move forward, to not let their actions define us." I sat in silence for a moment, weighing his words. It was a daunting prospect, the idea of letting go of the anger that had become so familiar. But deep down, I knew he was right. The path to healing wouldn't come from revenge, but from confronting my pain head-on. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier now. "Let's do it. Let's focus on ourselves, on becoming better men. No more revenge, no more anger. Just healing." Seymour smiled, relief washing over his features. "That's what I like to hear. We're in this together, man. We're gonna get through this, one day at a time. As we sat there, the weight of our decision settling in, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. The anger that had once consumed me was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but it no longer held the same power. I was ready to let it go, to embrace a new path forward. It wouldn't be easy. I knew that. The road to healing was long and winding, filled with obstacles and setbacks. But with Seymour by my side, I felt a renewed sense of determination. We would face this challenge together, supporting each other every step of the way. As I looked around my living room, I saw not just the remnants of a life I had lost, but the seeds of a new beginning. It was time to let go of the past and embrace the future, to focus on the things that truly mattered: growth, resilience, and ultimately, forgiveness. I knew that the journey ahead would be filled with ups and downs, moments of clarity and moments of doubt. But I was ready to face it head on, to confront my pain and emerge stronger on the other side. No more revenge, no more anger. Just me, Seymour, and the promise of a better tomorrow. The decision to leave revenge behind was not an easy one, but it was necessary. As I sat in my living room, reflecting on the journey I had taken, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had spent so much time consumed by anger and resentment. But now it was time to focus on myself and the life I wanted to build. With Seymour's support, I began to shift my mindset. I realized that I had been allowing Robin and Sergey to dictate my emotions, to control how I felt about myself. It was time to reclaim my power, to take charge of my own narrative. I needed to invest my energy into something that would bring me fulfillment, rather than waste it on thoughts of revenge that only left me feeling empty. I started by setting personal goals. I pulled out a notebook and began to jot down everything I wanted to achieve, both in the short term and the long term. I wanted to improve my fitness, not just for the sake of revenge, but for my own health and well-being. I wanted to explore new hobbies, to rediscover the passions I had set aside during my marriage. I wanted to travel, to see new places and meet new people. Most importantly, I wanted to learn how to love myself again. As I began to focus on these goals, I felt a sense of excitement bubbling within me. I signed up for a local cooking class, something I had always wanted to try. The thought of learning new recipes and techniques invigorated me. I also committed to a more structured workout routine, setting specific targets for my physical fitness. I wanted to push myself, not for revenge, but to prove to myself that I was capable of growth and change. Seymour became my partner in this journey of self-discovery. We began to meet regularly, not just for workouts, but also to share our progress and support each other in our individual pursuits. We would often grab coffee after our sessions, discussing our goals and the steps we were taking to achieve them. It felt good to have someone who understood what I was going through, someone who was also focused on moving forward. One afternoon, as we sat in a cafe, I shared my excitement about the cooking class. "I can't wait to learn how to make Italian food," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "I've always loved pasta, and now I'll finally know how to make it from scratch." Seymour chuckled, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "That's awesome. I can already picture you whipping up a feast. You'll have to invite me over for dinner once you master it." "Deal," I replied, feeling a sense of camaraderie that lifted my spirits. "And what about you? What's next on your list?" Seymour leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "I've been thinking about picking up the guitar again. I used to play a lot before everything happened, and it might be a good way to channel my emotions." "Definitely do it," I encouraged him. "Music can be such a powerful outlet. Plus, it'll give you something to focus on besides the past." As we continued to talk, I felt a sense of hope blossoming within me. I was no longer defined by my anger or my past. I was reclaiming my identity and my happiness. The more I focused on my goals, the less I thought about Robin and Sergey. The bitterness that had once consumed me was slowly fading away, replaced by a sense of empowerment and self-worth. I also started to reconnect with old friends, people I had neglected during my marriage. I reached out to them, inviting them to join me for outings or just to catch up over coffee. It felt good to rebuild those connections, to remind myself that I was not alone in this journey. I was surrounded by people who cared about me and who wanted to see me thrive. As the weeks turned into months, I began to notice significant changes in my life. My workouts became more focused and enjoyable, and I felt stronger and healthier than I had in years. The cooking class was a revelation. I discovered a passion for creating delicious meals, and the sense of accomplishment I felt when I plated my first homemade pasta was indescribable. I also started to explore new hobbies, from painting to hiking. Each new experience brought with it a sense of joy and fulfillment that I had long forgotten. I was learning to embrace life again, to find happiness in the little things. Through it all, I kept reminding myself of the importance of letting go of the past. I had made the conscious decision to move away from revenge, and I was determined to stick to it. I realized that the only way to truly heal was to focus on my own growth and happiness, rather than dwelling on the actions of others. One evening, as I sat in my kitchen preparing dinner, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I had come so far from the dark place I had been in just a few months ago. The anger that had once consumed me was now a distant memory, replaced by a sense of peace and purpose. I was finally learning to love myself again, to appreciate the person I was becoming. As I stirred the sauce simmering on the stove, I couldn't help but smile. I was no longer a man defined by betrayal. I was a man on a journey of self-discovery, ready to embrace whatever life had in store for me. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to face it with open arms, leaving the desire for revenge far behind. With my newfound focus on personal growth, I realized it was time to tackle another significant aspect of my life. My career. The job I had held for years had become a source of frustration and dissatisfaction, and I knew that if I wanted to truly embrace this new chapter, I needed to find work that aligned with my passions and aspirations. I started by updating my resume, a task I had been putting off for far too long. I sat down at my desk, the familiar hum of my computer filling the quiet room. Can I share something with you? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Of course, she replied, her eyes filled with warmth and understanding. I'm here for you. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. I've been thinking a lot about Robin and Sergey lately. The anger I felt toward them has been weighing on me, and I realized that it's time for me to let it go. Emma nodded, encouraging me to continue. That sounds like an important step. What do you think is holding you back? I think it's the feeling of betrayal, I admitted, my heart heavy. I thought I could never forgive them for what they did. But I've come to understand that holding on to that anger is only hurting me. It's time to move forward. As I spoke, I felt a sense of clarity emerging. The realization that forgiveness was not about excusing their actions, but about freeing myself from the burden of resentment began to sink in. I didn't want to be defined by my past any longer. I wanted to embrace the present and the future that lay ahead. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to forget what happened, Emma said gently. It's about releasing the hold that anger has on you. It's a gift you give to yourself. Her words resonated deeply within me, and I felt a sense of resolve building. I knew that I needed to confront my feelings head-on, to find a way to forgive Robin and Sergey for the pain they had caused me. It was time to take back my power. The next day, I decided to write letters to both Robin and Sergey. I wanted to express my feelings, my hurt, my anger, and ultimately, my desire for forgiveness. I found a quiet spot in the park, surrounded by the beauty of nature, and began to write. As I poured my heart onto the pages, I felt the weight of my emotions lifting. I wrote about the pain of betrayal, the feelings of inadequacy, and the anger that had consumed me for so long. But I also wrote about my journey of healing, the lessons I had learned, and the strength I had found within myself. When I finished the letters, I felt a sense of liberation. I realized that I didn't need to send them, the act of writing was enough. It was a cathartic release, a way to acknowledge my feelings and let them go. I was ready to forgive. That evening, I sat down with Emma and shared what I had done. I wrote letters to Robin and Sergey, I said, my voice steady. I expressed everything I felt, and now I feel free. Emma smiled, her eyes shining with pride. That's amazing, Jake. You took a significant step toward healing. How do you feel now? I feel lighter, I replied, a sense of peace washing over me. I realize that forgiveness doesn't mean I condone their actions. It simply means I'm choosing to let go of the anger that has held me back. As the days turned into weeks, I noticed a profound shift within myself. The anger and resentment that had once consumed me began to fade, replaced by a sense of acceptance. I no longer felt the need to dwell on the past. I was focused on the present and the possibilities that lay ahead. I also found myself reflecting on the lessons I had learned through this journey. I had discovered the importance of self-love, the power of vulnerability, and the beauty of connection. I was no longer defined by my pain. I was a man who had risen from the ashes, ready to embrace life with open arms. One afternoon, as I walked through the park, I felt a sense of gratitude for the experiences that had shaped me. I had come to understand that forgiveness was a gift I gave to myself, a way to reclaim my power and move forward. I no longer felt the need to carry the burden of anger. I was free. As I looked up at the clear blue sky, I felt a sense of hope and possibility. I was ready to embrace the future, to continue building a life filled with love, creativity, and connection. The journey had been challenging, but it had also been transformative. In that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. I would continue to grow, learn, and love deeply. I would honor my past, but I would not let it define me. I was ready to step into the light, leaving behind the shadows of anger and resentment. I was ready to live fully, embracing the beauty of each new day. As I stood on the balcony of my apartment, overlooking the vibrant city below, I felt a wave of tranquility wash over me. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow across the skyline, and I couldn't help but smile at the beauty of the moment. It was a stark contrast to the darkness I had once felt, a reminder of how far I had come on this journey of healing and self-discovery. The past year had been a whirlwind of emotions, pain, anger, growth, and ultimately, acceptance. I had faced my demons, confronted the betrayal that had once consumed me, and emerged stronger on the other side. With each challenge I encountered, I learned valuable lessons about resilience, forgiveness, and the importance of surrounding myself with love and support. Now, as I looked toward the future, I felt a renewed sense of hope and possibility. I had rebuilt my life, not just in terms of my career and hobbies, but also in the way I viewed myself and my place in the world. I was no longer defined by my past. I was a man ready to embrace new adventures and opportunities. With Emma by my side, our relationship blossomed into something beautiful and fulfilling. She had become my partner in every sense of the word, encouraging me to pursue my passions and reminding me of the importance of living in the present. Together, we explored the world around us, from art galleries to hiking trails, each experience deepening our connection and enriching our lives. As I reflected on my journey, I felt a sense of gratitude for the lessons I had learned. I had discovered the power of vulnerability, the strength that comes from opening oneself to love and connection. I had learned to let go of the anger that had weighed me down, and in doing so, I had freed myself to embrace the joys of life. Looking ahead, I had exciting plans for the future. I wanted to continue developing my pottery skills, perhaps even opening my studio one day. The thought of sharing my passion with others, teaching classes, and creating a space for creativity filled me with enthusiasm. I envisioned a community of artists coming together to explore their craft, and I was eager to be a part of that. In addition to my pottery aspirations, I was determined to travel more. There were so many places I wanted to explore, cultures I wanted to experience, and people I wanted to meet. I dreamed of visiting art festivals around the world, immersing myself in different artistic traditions, and expanding my creative horizons. As I stood there, the cool evening breeze brushing against my skin, I made a promise to myself: I would continue to embrace life with open arms. I would seek out new experiences, challenge myself to grow, and never lose sight of the importance of connection and community. With each passing day, I felt more confident in my ability to navigate whatever challenges lay ahead. I had learned that life was a series of ups and downs, but it was how we responded to those moments that truly mattered. I was ready to face the future, equipped with the knowledge that I had the strength to overcome anything. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, I took a deep breath, inhaling the promise of a new beginning. I was filled with hope and excitement for what was to come. The journey had been long, but it had led me to this moment, a moment of clarity, purpose, and possibility. I turned away from the balcony, stepping back into my home, where the warmth of love and creativity awaited me. I was ready to write the next chapter of my life, one filled with joy, passion, and the unwavering belief that the best was yet to come. With a heart full of gratitude and a spirit eager for adventure, I embraced the future, knowing that each day was a gift to be cherished.